Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hey there, healthcare humans. Before we dive into this week's episode, I wanted to give you a quick reminder that Creating Space, my new coaching program and retreat, is going to be starting October 7th, 2024. So if you have been listening to the podcast for a while and really already making some changes in your life that help you rehumanize healthcare, and you're ready for the next step, you're ready to be a part of a community of healthcare humans who are asking these same innovative, system changing questions of what happens if I find a way for my version of healthcare to be human for me? How does that change the system as a whole? How can it feel better for my own life? And you want to spend most Monday afternoons with me for the next 6 months, as well as a fabulous 3-night retreat in April where we sink in even deeper and get to be in real-time community with each other. I would love for you to join me. There's a really amazing group of healthcare humans who have already signed up, but there is space for you. We're waiting for you. So what are you waiting for? So in this podcast, the show notes below, you'll be able to find the link, or you can just go to joanchanmd.com/space, book your call with me. We can make sure it's the right time for you, good fit for you. And let's get going. We're waiting for you to join us in Creating Space. And I'm so excited for you to book your call and see you there. Now on with the episode. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for tuning into this bonus episode of The Other Human in the Room. So I'm definitely going to release this as a bonus versus like the only episode for a week, because I want it to be extra that people can decide whether they want to listen to or not. Some of you I know really like having your weekly episode. And so I don't want to take that away from you in case you don't want to like listen to an episode that's full of spoilers for certain movies. Or if you're just not into movies, I guess. So this one will be a bonus. And the bonus topic, it's going to be a movie club today. I'm going to talk about now I've discovered I have two favorite movies. One is just freshly that I've watched it, which is Inside Out. And very recently I watched Inside Out 2, which is, as of recording this, just like out in theaters over this past summer. And I got to watch it with my kids in theater and with my husband. And the overall like review is that these movies are amazing, and we should have to like show them in schools and also like in medical school and and everywhere. And they just actually very clearly portray some really core facts about emotions that we forget in a way that's accessible. And they use a really lovely like framing an analogy that then every time I think about it or watch it, or like after I watch it, I'm reminded of a way of interacting with my own emotions that can like make emotions feel more accessible. Because for most of us, we've been handed a pile of inhuman stories about our emotions, right? Like we've been told that emotions are weakness, emotions are dangerous, emotions are to be ashamed of or to run away from. They're horrible, bad parts of us that we should shove in a box, versus being like absolutely natural, normal, inescapable physiological reactions. It would be as if we collectively were ashamed of sneezing, ashamed of blinking, ashamed of blushing, which, I mean, those actually do have more or less on a gradation societal shame stories, aren't them? But they're all, again, natural human reactions. Like, what do you want our bodies to do? Our bodies emote. And so these, number one, definitely watch these movies, period. Strong recommendation. On this podcast, I very rarely like tell you to do something, and I am telling you. You don't have to. You're an authority over your own life, of course, but like I strongly recommend. Let's put it that way. So what I wanted to do in this podcast is go through some of like the key takeaways that I love from these movies, which means I will be like spoiling a bit of what happens in these movies, which is why if you really don't want to be spoiled and you haven't seen them yet, wait till after you watch them to listen to this, please. And I just want to go through it and kind of geek out about emotions for a while. And you can have that to enjoy if you like. So let's get started, shall we? So I can start with the first movie because they sort of follow one after the other. So the main premise of these movies is that we're basically spending the majority of the movie inside the brain of a girl named Riley. I think in the first movie she's like maybe 9 or 10. She's like an older girl, but not a teenager yet. In this movie, like you're seeing like the core, there's like a dashboard and like a main control center of her brain. And at this dashboard, which like kind of controls all of her actions and what she says, there are these 5 core emotions. They even go through, I'm sure it starts like, I'm not hallucinating this. No, this is in the movie. Like at the very beginning, as a baby, she has the one emotion, which is joy. And so joy is the main character of the movie, the emotion of joy. And joy is like this adorable, yellow glowing pixie-ish kind of person, like humanoid creature, voiced by Amy Poehler, who's the best. And then very shortly after the child Riley is born, a second emotion appears, which is sadness. And that's another like blue humanoid creature that's got a big sweater and looks very sad all the time, and voiced by Phyllis from The Office. I don't remember her last name, but I think her real name is Phyllis, isn't it? And I didn't do a lot of research for this. I'm just telling you what's on the top of my head. And then over time, these other 3 emotions appear. And this is like based on, like, there's different schools of emotion research, but this is based on one of the big ones, is that there's like core emotions. And so the 5 emotions they have portrayed, which as like characters in the movie, is joy and sadness. And they're the 2 main characters, joy being like the protagonist. And in the first one, sadness is sort of the quote unquote bad one, but not really. And we'll get into that. And then the other 3 are disgust, fear, and anger. One of my favorite resources would say that those are the 5 core emotions, but would add one extra, which is like excitement/arousal, including sexual arousal. So that's just like FYI. These are the same kind of core emotions that I really like considering in my own life and that I like teach in some of my courses and stuff. And yeah, so how it works is that like these emotions are characters and they interact with each other and they take turns like driving the control panel and therefore cause Riley to do things. So like joy takes on the panel and then Riley smiles and laughs and like dances around and does a silly dance. And then if like sadness is in control, she cries or she slows down and she feels sad, right? And like all of them are sort of, and then fear, if fear's on the, Riley will be like walking towards something dangerous, and so then fear's like, wait, I'm gonna be in control, and like makes her turn away. And so it also shows like the purpose of each of the emotions. And that alone is like, I mean, that is like, even if like nothing interesting happened in the movie, just like showing like, look, each of your emotions is there for a reason and has a very specific purpose. And the thing that I remember even in the advertising for the movie, and that is said in the movie, is like, all your feelings are there to take care of you. And I feel like that is a revolutionary concept that has always been true, but that because of dumb socialization that is probably, who knows its actual origins, but like, it's so shame based of like, don't feel fear or don't feel anger or don't feel sadness. And it's like, what do you want me to do? Like, sadness is here to take care of me when I've lost something. Fear is here to take care of me when I'm like in danger, and then these emotions are exploited. So then we are taught that more things are threatening than they have to be. So we feel more fear than we have to fear. Like, but there's something about habit being these little characters that like just makes it so accessible and you can see so clearly that they're all on your side. I remember listening to a podcast by Pete Docter, who was the director of the first movie. I think he could have created the movie too. And I think he was talking about his own son, or he was talking about someone's son who had watched the movie and then was like talking about how then after he watched the movie, he went and like jumped off the highest diving board when before he had been too scared to do it. And when like the parent asked like, hey, so like what made it feel okay to jump off the highest diving board? Then the kid was like, well, I just like talked to my fear and said, hey, I know you're taking care of me, but we're okay. We can do this. And we did it together. And like, I almost want to cry now. I cried when I cried when the initial podcast came on. It's like, it's just so beautiful to think of this little kid and also the little kid in us and all of us, like, what if we were in that kind of really loving relationship with our emotions? And like, you can picture like, oh, so who's in, at, I often say like, who's in the driving seat, and as if they're all on a bus, but this one's like, oh, who's at the control panel? Who's the one, which emotion's trying to control me now? And why? How is it that they're trying to take care of me? And does it, is that true? Is that actually something that like is an old story? So I can say to that emotion, hey, oh, thank you so much for offering me disgust, but like actually that was an old story and isn't the case. That isn't something that's dangerous to me that I have to avoid. I think a lot of like racism and like other like biasy things are like deeply inhuman socialized disgust mechanism, like homophobia, like the way we call them phobia, like in some ways it's fear, but in some ways it's disgust. And so we can like decondition ourselves from these things, and but that doesn't mean that disgust is bad. Disgust, you want to feel disgust when you smell rotten food so you don't eat it, for example, right? Like these are really important emotions that take care of us. So that's the first big lesson of these movies, and I'm already obsessed, right? Another thing that happens in this first movie is that like Joy as the main character is and like what happens to Riley, the girl, is that they move across the country. And so a lot of the things that used to bring Riley joy and like playing hockey and being with her friends, like now she's missing them all. So, it makes sense that this would be a time where she'd feel a lot of sadness, but Joy as a character is feeling like that's not okay. Like we should be trying to help Riley stay happy. And so she like tries to like shove sadness out of the way, and but what ends up happening is they get lost from the main panel. So like joy and sadness are now like wandering through other parts of Riley's brain. Lots of, quirky little puns and cuteness going on. But what that means is like basically Riley can't feel sadness or joy. And it's actually a really like great depiction of what depression might feel like. And you see Riley from the outside just get more withdrawn, can't feel anything, can only feel anger, disgust, fear, and even those like start to get taken away from her, and now she can't feel anything. And that's sort of this, instead of depression being overwhelming sadness, like maybe that could be true, but also what if depression is like just being disconnected from all your emotions and feeling not much of anything? And that just seemed like a very powerful way to think about depression. And so that's a piece that was interesting to have portrayed. And the other piece of like sort of the central conflict of that movie is it's a really good illustration of what you might have heard as being talked about as like toxic positivity. Like Joy in both movies really displays some like traits of toxic positivity where she's sort of like basically like I'm the most important one and it's only good and safe if Riley feels me, if Riley feels happy. We definitely think that way, especially for our kids, like they can only feel happy and it's bad if they feel the other emotions, when really like it's so great when we feel happy. It means that something really great is happening to us. It means that we are safe. It means that we have, there is no threat, like I've said recently on other podcasts, and it's also really great, you could say, or really important to notice if instead we're feeling sadness and asking ourselves why. And that the real purpose of sadness is, when you're sad, we're socially primed. If we see someone sad, we're socially primed to go to them, tend to them. It's a marker socially for others to come and take care of us. And it's a way for us to sort of process and identify something that meant a lot to us and that had a lot of meaning to us. That's like so important. Another feature that's happening is like Riley is looking past back at past emotions that used to be happy emotions, and now sadness is coloring them with blue instead of just the nice happy yellow because they're things that she's missed, and that's all just like a part of life. And it really reminded me of this book that I've only snacked on as always, but it's called Bittersweet by Susan Cain, and it's just this notion that like joy and grief, like light and dark, birth and death, the bitter and the sweet are like forever paired. And really that's displayed well in the movie, where at the end of the movie, like joy and sadness are like friends and they're partners. And it's sort of understood that like those are things that go together. Joy is the indicator light when we are interacting with things that we love, that light us up, that are like our authentic selves, that are our sources of nourishment. And sadness is there as the indicator light if we've lost them. Like both of those are the ways that we learn what we love. If we had an indicator light of joy for absolutely everything, now we're loving, I don't know, crocodiles and then they eat us or something. Like, like it's important. And anyway, whether it's important or not, it's how it works that we will love and have happiness and have joy and delight more for some things than others. And it will mean that if those are missing, it makes sense that we would want an indicator to let us know, oh gosh, we're missing a lot of those. Maybe that means we ought to go seek out those in our lives. Like, it's important to know when things that are good for us. It's why we have the physical sensation of hunger. If we only had the sensation of like fullness or pleasure from eating, that would be fine. But then we would feel very neutral. If we only felt neutral, if we did not have enough food, then we would die. Like, it's important that our body lets us know when we're missing things that are good for us. And it makes sense that those would be less comfortable emotions because they're meant to be like, hello, you need something, like indicator light. And so like sadness, hunger, right? These are emotions that make sense. And the notion of the bittersweet of it all, that's actually a really important concept to cherish and understand and not think that anything's gone wrong. That's been a really helpful concept for my life, especially because like I feel it a lot, especially with my kids. Because like the most purest joy I've honestly ever felt has been with my kids and with my husband. And some of the most like searing like pain and pre grief, even though they're not gone, has been with those people. And I used to think that meant there was something wrong with me, or like I don't know how to feel happiness correctly. But I've now come to really understand it's part of it. Those things are meant to be mixed because I'm a human being. And it just shows how sharply I love them that I feel both of these in tandem. And I've started to almost learn how to enjoy the bittersweetness of it. It's a way of my body saying, pay attention, be here now, and savor as well as you can. And I don't always love it, of course, but like it's a good practice to remember that. And I love that this movie really helped me remember that. So those were the main lessons and sort of takeaways that I took from that first movie. And so now I just recently, that came out a number of years ago, like I think before my first kid. I don't even remember. It was like quite a few years ago. But now, just this past summer, Inside Out 2 has come out. And so what's happened to like the girl character in which Riley, who's like the girl in which all of these emotions are residing, is at the start of the movie, they're all happy, everything's actually going pretty well. Joy and sadness know how to work together, they're friends, they're all in harmony. And then new issue comes up, and that's what makes the plot of the movie. And what happens? It's just so funny. Like this whole movie, I swear, like in the movie theater, I could hear all the adults like laughing really loud, and then I couldn't hear any other adults crying, but definitely myself and my husband were like sobbing at the end. And then the kids are just like chilling either way. They seemed entertained, but they weren't like screaming with laughter, and they definitely weren't crying as intensely as the adults were. And so what we were laughing at the beginning of the movie was puberty arrives. So now Riley is reaching her adolescence, and so puberty comes in, and like literally like the place gets destroyed by the puberty changer people under construction. They're going to be back to actually build up the rest of it in like 4 to 5 years, like hilarity like that. And along with that sort of deconstruction, reconstruction of like the brain, come new emotions. So this movie talks about like 4 new emotions. Anxiety, who sort of ends up being like the main second character. Like Joy is still the main character, and anxiety is like the new, you could say enemy or villain, but not really, but like the one that's in conflict with Joy. And then the other 3 beyond anxiety are envy, embarrassment, and ennui, which is like kind of like the boredom, like who cares emotion. And those were just, I mean, so delightful, so relatable, especially for teenage years, especially anxiety, especially for me. I certainly have a strong anxiety, a noisy anxiety character myself. So it was nice to recognize, it was nice and not nice, honestly, to recognize her. And they really skewer the anxiety experience very well. I felt like they were reading my diary. And basically, the central kind of conflict that happens is anxiety shows up. And at first, everyone's like impressed with what anxiety can do. Anxiety wants to take over from Joy and say, no, Joy. Like, Joy wants Riley to stay like goofy and doing what she loves. But anxiety notices that there's new social situations that are coming up. That means like, wait, you can't be goofy. Otherwise you won't fit in with those people. Wait, you have to make sure you're actually hiding this part of yourself, even though you like it, because otherwise you're not going to be happy in the future by having friends. It all sort of hinges on social belonging in a way that's deeply relatable and very related to like tons of what I talk about on this podcast. And so over time, anxiety really like takes over to a point where then Joy's trying to be like, no, Riley should act like this. And then like anxiety like kicks her out and like then actually kicks out all of the core emotions. So like joy, sadness, disgust, fear, and anger are all like kicked out of the control panel. So and anxiety is with along a little bit with envy and the others, but mainly anxiety is like the only one that's driving the bus. It's the only one like at the control panel. And then the main sort of story is that the other emotions have to save Riley by finding their way back to the control panel. And not only does she kick the emotions out, which actually is like a really good kind of metaphor, because one of my favorite like emotion like analogies, or what do I want to say, like frameworks to understand emotions is like there's your core emotions and then there's your inhibitory emotions, which are anxiety, guilt, and shame. And they suppress your ability to feel and connect with your core emotions if you've like experienced that those are kind of dangerous to feel or not okay to feel. And that's basically exactly what happens with this anxiety storyline is the anxiety like kicks out all the core emotions. It's like, you aren't welcome here. If you actually feel yourselves, like if you are expressed completely so that Riley has a behavior related to full anger, full sadness, full joy, you are going to get basically socially killed. And so my job is to suppress you so that you can survive this environment, right? Which feels very relatable in like anxiety has the wisdom of a horrible inhuman society that suppresses humans' core emotions and doesn't think it's okay to feel them. And so you see that coming through. And that's just like a very like astute analogy that like comes up a lot. And so it's sort of interesting again. So you could be like, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, it's like, oh, am I feeling like I'm not going to have a sense of belonging if I express my true emotions? What are the true emotions underneath this anxiety that may also maybe on my own without anyone watching, I may want to check what emotions are trying to express themselves, that anxiety is trying to kick out of the control panel, that I can let, oh, there is some sadness here that anxiety doesn't want me to feel. Oh, there is some sad fear, some anger, like whatever it is. That's just a useful metaphor. So I love that the movie really shows that well. The other big concept that the second movie displays that's new that I really love and thought was fascinating is like that over time Riley the kid is like developing a sense of self. And so the way that the movie shows the sense of self is like basically when emotions happen, when something happens that is made into a memory, certain core memories are taken and like put down in this like pool that then sprout up into pieces of a sense of self. And so at first, before puberty happens, Joy is in charge and really is like the leader. And so she is creating the sense of self. But because she's still got this like toxic positivity trait, what she keeps doing is like she will take the happy memories, the ones that were really joyous, where like Riley excels at hockey or like is kind to a friend or has like positive bonding and connecting experiences with herself and the world, and she puts those in. And so then the sense of self that is created is like, I am a good person. And that's interesting. So sort of because of these good interactions I've had, I'm developing a self as a good person. But the trouble is what Joy is doing is if there's a memory that doesn't fit that. So like one of the early examples is like Riley kind of cheats at hockey, or I forget, she hits someone. Anyway, yeah, she gets a penalty in hockey. And so that's not showing her kindness. That doesn't feel good. And so instead of letting that get integrated into potentially Riley's sense of self, and instead Joy takes it and like throws it to the back of her mind. Like literally the little ball gets like shot way, way, way back into, you can't even see it, like at the back of the cave, and shoved down to the back of their mind. And so, you know, that's gonna be a plot point later, right? Basically. And so it's interesting. So you're having this sort of fragile sense of self built around being a good person, in which you're only allowed to take the evidence of the times that you deem as seeing yourself as good. I just think that's really interesting. And a lot of us can maybe relate to feeling a need to feel and be seen as good. And so when we're confronted with evidence that is less than good of our actions that caused harm, we're actually not that willing to look at it because we think it threatens our sense of self of goodness. We think if we cause harm, if we make a mistake, if we do something that's sort of against what we think should be good, instead we might get defensive, or we might just like try and hide it and lie and shove it away. We certainly wouldn't look at it directly. We'd blame the other person because it threatens our good sense of self. So I thought, I mean, that's already such a rich analogy. And then anxiety comes along. And anxiety, she, kicks joy and all the core emotions out of there. And she's like, we need a new sense of self, because like good person sense of self was coming up against some of what anxiety wanted to do, which was like ditch the old friends, go for the cool new friends, lie about which bands you like, basically anxiety is learning how to people please, learning how to fawn, learning how to shape shift and evolve into whatever she needs to do in order to belong. And that's starting to fragment against the notions of being a good person, because some of the actions that she feels she has to take to belong are like not good actions. And so she actually breaks off that good sense of self and throws it to the back of her mind with the rest of the bad memories, and then starts to make these new memories of like, so like one of them is like, if I'm good at hockey, then I'll have friends. If I'm friends with the cool kids, then I will belong. Like these are some of the new memories that are forming new beliefs. And it ends up sprouting into like over time, because she's so focused on belonging, 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 and these conditional kinds of senses of belonging that are tied to her behavior, her actions, her performance. The sense of self that develops is I'm not good enough, because there'll be times that she can't quite make it. And so it's like, I'm not good enough. I have to try harder. I'm not good enough. I have to try harder. And that's definitely one of the moments when both my husband and I started weeping because it's very familiar. That sense of not good enough, And so like that, and just that notion of just like, that when we think we're not good enough, it's because of maybe a lifetime, or at least many, many occasions of memories of like, you only belong, your goodness is defined by, you are only good if, and you work so hard for these evolving and impossibly growing and often contradictory criteria of what it means to be good, to belong, to be safe with other humans, right? And so there was something just so powerful about seeing that come to fruition. And at the height of the movie, then Joy's come and she's brought back the old sense of self. And anxiety's in a total panic attack. She's tried, but she's like, why isn't it working? Why is everyone actually more mad at me? Because she's getting more and more desperate. And her outside actions of like lying and betraying her friends. And, like she's starting to witness that living out the hypothesis that I can earn my worth and earn my belonging at any cost, it ends up backfiring, because it does. She's having a panic attack. And so finally Joy helps her out of that. And really, the really beautiful thing is, at first Joy tries to take off the I'm not good enough and put back on the I'm a good person, but it doesn't really fit anymore, because like Riley has done a bunch of things that are against her values and her ethics. So the good person notion, Joy realizes she has to let in all the bad, in quotes, memories, all the times that she has been in violation of her ethics as well. And then the sense of self is more dynamic. It's like, I can be selfish. I can be a good friend. I can, you know, I can lie. Like it's actually like it's multiple things, and it's this beautiful multiplicity, which me, I am large. I contain multitudes. I'm always a fan of that Walt Whitman quote. Like there's something so beautiful about seeing like all the parts of her getting integrated and having her whole sense of self that's also based on choice and circumstance and context, so that but wrapped around like a sense of belonging in herself, because all of her parts get to belong. It's a really freaking good movie. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it sounds very esoteric, but it's also very funny and cute and emotional while you're watching it. So all of the new emotions are good. Also, anxiety is good. Anxiety helps you think for the future. Embarrassment's good. It's good to know if you're in a situation where others may judge you, even if you choose to be embarrassed and risk embarrassment and do it anyway. And the last beautiful thing is just like Riley ends up inviting Joy back to be her primary conductor, in this really beautiful thing. And so she's playing hockey instead of from a place of anxiety, if I need to prove myself, just from the joy of hockey. And the way they show sort of the embodied way Riley, like they show her touching her skin, they show her in this really deeply embodied state. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful depiction of embodiment, in my opinion, and of joy and what practicing joy can bring to your life. And I'm all about joy this year, joy and pleasure. So, and expanding your capacity for joy. So yeah, those are the main things I wanted to say about both movies. And I encourage you to consider watching them. If you have seen them and you want to talk about them, email me, DM me on Instagram. I'd love to hear what you thought. And if nothing else, always remember that your emotions are there to take care of you. That's the central thesis of both these movies, and it's the truest thing. It's the way to feel the most human I feel is when I remember that, because to be human is to have emotion, and it's the way we experience our lives. It's how you feel good is by feeling, right? So that's what these movies reminded me. And yeah, let me know. Also, if there's other movies you think I should watch or if I should review in some way on the podcast, reach out and let me know. But yeah, I'd love to know if you've seen Inside Out and what you thought of it. And until next time, I hope you have a multitude of feelings this week and befriend all of them. Bye. I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.